Title: Shanghai alerts. The 1 billion supercar tower is already coming apart. Music: urgent, thudding bassline visual. Fast kinetic cuts of Shanghai Shuangpu River skyline zooming in on a gleaming 66-story ultra-luxury twisted glass tower rising 250 meters over the waterfront. Text flays: Shanghai, China narrator. A 66-story hyper-luxury skyscraper. A glittering monument of steel and glass rising 250 meters directly over the ultra-exclusive Huangpu River waterfront in Shanghai. This was supposed to be the absolute pinnacle of branded real estate on planet Earth. The very first residential mega project, explicitly branded by a legendary European hypercar manufacturer. We are talking about a tower featuring a $59 million triple-story penthouse, delivered with a 1 of 24 820 horsepower track-only supercar, physically parked inside the living room as a permanent architectural trophy. A development featuring its own private superyacht marina at the base, an automated drone delivery helipad on the roof, and an astonishing 99% sell-out rate before the main structural concrete was even completely poured. But tonight, that entire billionaire's fantasy is violently unraveling. Sound effect: metal snap, echoing crash. On November 24, 2025, a massive, solid steel protective cap covering one of the skyscraper's primary exterior structural tensioning cables completely sheared off at a height of over 150 meters. It plummeted through the air, smashing directly into the luxury infinity pool deck below. If anyone had been lounging by the water, it would have been an instant catastrophe. It was pure luck, not engineering, that kept the pool deck empty. Following that terrifying structural failure, independent forensic engineers stepped in to perform a comprehensive property assessment. What they uncovered wasn't just a simple punch list of cosmetic defects. It was an absolute autopsy of a brand new billion-dollar building, visual graphics spread, showing defects detect across major building systems. We are talking about severe concrete spalling across nearly every single floor slab edge. Structural steel reinforcement left completely exposed to the humid, aggressive maritime air, rusting and expanding inside the load-bearing elements. Loose architectural masonry, blocks dangling hundreds of meters above the public sidewalks below. The structural degradation is so severe that terrified residents are now completely refusing to step foot onto their own private outdoor terraces. The building officially opened its doors in April 2024. It has been occupied for less than 18 months. Yet, the elite owners who poured millions into this project are now accusing the billionaire developer of running an immense corporate shell game, stripping the project of assets and locking in unvetted, non-competitive service contracts just days before handing over the keys. How does the most prestigious, ultra-luxury branded tower in all of mainland China start shedding pieces of its own structural skeleton before the initial warranty has even expired? To understand the scale of this engineering betrayal, we have to go back to the moment this project was marketed as the undisputed future of architectural luxury. Music shifts, high energy, corporate tech energy. This is the Zenith Automotive Residences, 66 stories, 250 meters tall, occupying a highly coveted plot right at the bend of the Huangpu River. For nearly a decade, this prime piece of waterfront real estate sat completely empty, trapped in a web of failed commercial proposals and bankrupt corporate joint ventures. Then, a prominent billionaire tycoon named Zhang Xilong arrived with an aggressive, unprecedented concept. Zhang's family conglomerate had amassed an immense fortune building one of the largest hypermarket and logistics networks across East Asia. His development arm, G&G Horizon Developments, purchased the stranded waterfront site for a staggering $125 million in cash. But Zhang knew that in Shanghai's ultra-competitive luxury market, standard high-end finishes wouldn't cut it. He needed a hook. So he executed a massive, multi-million-dollar licensing deal with an iconic European hypercar brand, whose vehicles routinely command millions of dollars and whose logo represents absolute mechanical precision. The pitch to Shanghai's ultra-high net worth elite was intoxicating. The Zenith Residences would be an architectural masterpiece engineered to the same obsessive, uncompromising tolerances as a world championship racing machine. At the absolute apex of the tower sat the $59 million penthouse, spanning 3 full floors and nearly 2,000 square meters of interior space. It was sold with the ultimate collector's prize, the very last track Crumbling supercar produced by the brand. The 820 horsepower machine was hoisted up 60 stories via a specialized external crane system and anchored directly into the concrete floor frame, a multi-million-dollar trophy welded permanently into the residential architecture. The marketing blitz worked perfectly. By early 2022, G&G Horizon Developments reported that 99% of the tower's ultra-luxury units had been sold, generating over $100 million in revenue in just the first 60 days of the sales launch. Buyers were repeatedly assured that the prestigious automotive logo on the building's facade guaranteed a flawless standard of construction behind every single wall. Nothing would be skipped. Nothing would be rushed. Prominent among the luxury promises printed in the glossy, gold-embossed sales brochures was an exclusive, permanent partnership, granting residents private VIP beach club access at a nearby 5-star luxury island resort, complete with a private commuter ferry running on an exclusive schedule directly from the tower's marina. But there was one critical, terrifying reality that no sales brochure ever made clear. Music drops low. Ominous droned the hypercar manufacturer's involvement began and ended completely with the corporate logo. The automotive brand was not financing the tower. They were not managing the daily construction crews. They were not signing off on a single structural concrete pour. Nor were they supervising the critical tensioning of the building's load-bearing infrastructure. The brand simply collected their massive, multi-million-dollar upfront licensing fee, approved the use of their trademarked colors and emblem, and walked away long before the very first resident ever signed a deed. That legal and structural distinction would matter enormously when the building's physical reality began to collide with its luxury marketing. Because when the structural defects emerged and the frantic legal filings began, the legendary automotive brand that sold every square meter of this tower would not be named on a single piece of litigation. The building officially opened on April 30th, 2024. In March 2025, following standard procedures monitored by the local municipal housing bureau, control of the condominium association officially transferred from Zhang Shilong's development firm over to the actual resident owners. What the newly elected, resident-led board did next would completely shatter the illusion of luxury perfection. They immediately retained the services of the China Strategic Forensic Engineering Institute, a completely independent, elite structural consulting firm, to conduct a rigorous, top-to-bottom property condition assessment. Their mandate was simple: inspect every critical structural, mechanical, and architectural system in the tower, and document the findings with zero regard for corporate reputations. What the engineers brought back wasn't a standard punch list of minor touch-ups. It read like a terrifying clinical autopsy of a dying skyscraper. Music shifts, chronicled, aggressive data beat visual, the screen transcription to an animated 3D schematic of the residence tower, flashing crimson, alerts along the cantilevered edges, and the instructional course narrator. When the engineers from the China Strategic Forensic Engineering Institute unrolled the structural blueprints of the Zenith Automotive residences, they weren't looking at minor construction shortcuts. They were looking at a systemic structural failure embedded into the very bones of a 66-story, $1 billion skyscraper. Let's look at the hard chronology. To fully grasp how an elite tower begins to shed structural steel and concrete in under 18 months, you have to look at the raw data, the exact timestamps, and the brutal physics of fast-paced mega construction along the Huangpi River. Visual timeline graphic, April 2021 to April 2024. The engineering data reveals that during the peak structural phase between late 2021 and early 2023, the developer was pushing a relentless, high-speed construction cycle. In the race to meet lucrative pre-sale handover deadlines and cash in on the massive 99% sellout rate, The tower's core was rising at a pace that left independent structural inspectors deeply alarmed. We are talking about hundreds of thousands of metric tons of high-strength concrete poured into complex, specialized formworks under extreme atmospheric conditions. The primary forensic report, completed by the Institute, breaks down the catastrophic reality into undeniable, quantifiable figures. Let's start with the foundation and structural envelope data. The forensic audit, envelope and infrastructure failures exterior concrete spalling. Engineers documented a staggering 342 separate instances of active concrete spalling along the exterior cantilevered floor slabs between floors 15 and 60, exposed core rebar. Over 40% of the surveyed perimeter slab edges revealed reinforcing steel rebar that had been left completely unsealed, exposed directly to the high humidity, salt-tinged estuarine air of the Yangtze River Delta, waterproofing failures. A comprehensive infrared thermography scan of the building envelope revealed that over 12,000 square meters of external waterproofing membranes had completely failed, allowing active water intrusion into the structural masonry. Riverfront seawall displacement, down at the base where the private superyacht marina meets the river. Laser telemetry documented an unexpected 7mm lateral displacement of the reinforced concrete seawall, indicating massive hydrostatic pressure that wasn't properly compensated for in the initial civil engineering phase. Visual. Close-up 3D animation of post-tensioned concrete cables corroding. But the specific engineering defect that sent absolute shockwaves through the structural consulting community involves the building's post-tensioned concrete system. To build a hyper-slender, twisting 66-story luxury tower with wide, unobstructed panoramic floor plans, standard reinforced concrete isn't enough. You need extreme structural tension. Inside the concrete floor slabs of the Zenith residences run thousands of high-tensile steel tendons, encased in protective plastic sheaths. Once the concrete is poured and reaches a specific curing threshold, hydraulic jacks pull these steel cables under thousands of pounds of immense structural force, locking them down with heavy-duty metal anchoring caps at the exterior edges of the building. This post-tensioning system is what keeps a 250-meter tower stiff against the high-velocity typhoon winds that regularly bat the Shanghai coast. The system works flawlessly under one absolute, non-negotiable condition. The concrete and the exterior metal caps sealing those high-tension cables must remain 100% intact, waterproof, and hermetically sealed, according to the forensic engineering timestamps on November 24, 2025, at exactly 2:14 p.m. That non-negotiable condition failed. Sound effect, deep, metallic snap rumble. The forensic analysis indicates that water intrusion had been silently creeping into the anchoring pocket of a primary structural cable on the 38th floor for months. As the high-tensile steel corroded inside the unsealed pocket, it expanded. The immense, pent-up energy of the tensioned cable blew the heavy metal protective cap completely off the exterior face of the skyscraper. When that solid metal piece snapped, it didn't just fall. It was launched. It rocketed downward, cutting through the air before violently impacting the luxury infinity pool deck on the 55th floor, fracturing the premium imported tiles and sending shockwaves through the building's operational management. Visual. Red flashing text on screen. Post-tension failure risk. When structural engineers reviewed the physical debris, their blood ran cold. In a dry inland climate like Xi'an or Chengdu, an unsealed concrete pocket might take a decade to show critical deterioration. But in Shanghai, sitting directly on the edge of an active shipping channel, exposed to relentless maritime humidity and industrial airborne pollutants, the chemical timeline completely collapses. The salt air acts as a massive accelerant. The corrosion moves at an exponential rate, traveling inward along the tensioned steel lines toward the very core, holding the luxury floors directly above the residents' heads. The independent report noted that the concrete spalling along the balcony slab edges had progressed so rapidly that low-oz chunks of aggregate, some weighing up to 3 kilograms, were sitting completely detached on the upper ledges. At a height of 200 meters, if a 3-kilogram chunk of concrete falls from a terrace, it becomes a lethal kinetic missile, by the time it reaches the public boardwalk below. The China Strategic Forensic Engineering Institute's final assessment did not mince words. This wasn't a case of a few aesthetic items missed during a rushed final inspection before handover. These were structural and mechanical deficiencies deeply embedded into the tower's physical infrastructure from the very first concrete pour. The waterproofing was inadequate. The curing windows for the high-strength concrete had been unsafely compressed to meet corporate delivery schedules, and the quality control on the post-tension cable anchors was virtually non-existent. The luxury buyers who paid millions for what they believed was a masterclass in European precision engineering were actually sitting inside a structure's at-risk SC scenario, watching their multi-million-dollar waterfront investments literally shed pieces of their own skeletal framework into the river below. Music shifts, low tense, and a lightical drone visual. The screen expands to a map of eastern China, highlighting major, coastal urban centers, with flashing marks on recent skiliers and unfinished megablocks. Narrator. To fully comprehend the systemic failure of the Zenith Automotive residences, you have to look past the glitz of the Supercar brand logo and examine a terrifying structural pattern sweeping across China's ultra-luxury high-rise sector. This isn't an isolated incident of poor workmanship on a single Shanghai street corner. It is the architectural symptom of a multi-billion-dollar system that consistently rewards aggressive marketing cycles over rigorous structural engineering. For decades, the global real estate market watched in awe as China's coastal megacities rewrote the rules of vertical construction. High-rises in Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Tianjin rose at speeds that defied traditional engineering timelines. But today, the data tells us that the bill for that unprecedented speed is finally coming due. The failure mechanism observed at the Zenith residences, where post-tensioned cables corrode and concrete outer layers fracture within months of completion, belongs to the exact same family of engineering disasters that has plagued multi-billion-dollar developments across the country. Visual, archival, architectural schematics, and data comparisons between differing luxury towers. Let's look at the direct engineering parallels. Across China's elite real estate landscape, independent engineering panels are uncovering structural compromises that directly mirror the Shanghai disaster. Consider the hard telemetry data, vertical and structure performance, REV's development and location height, Story's primary structural defect, detected timeline to initial failure at automotive residence, Shanghai site. 250 meters 66, Story's cable anchor, failure and E. Extensively spalling slab edge less than 18 months from handover riverfront prestige blocks. 210 meters 54, Story's subsurface foundation, seepage and 12 millimeters, soil settlement, lateral shift 24 months, post-occupancy. Edgewater luxury towers, Guangzhou 195 meters 50 S. Tory's massive, glass curtain wall delamination and concrete matrix. Porosity 14 months from completion. Bayview Fashion Mansion, Shenzhen, 230 meters, 58 stories unsealed post-tension pockets and structural stucco erosion. 22 months from structural close-out. When you look at this data side by side, the structural reality becomes undeniable. In Guangzhou's elite Edgewater development, high-paying owners were forced to sue their corporate developers after documenting over 70 separate construction defects, dominated by severe water intrusion into the core foundations and catastrophic failure of the upper exterior cladding. Just like the Shanghai Tower, the Guangzhou project relied on a highly lucrative licensing agreement with a prominent international design house to drive record-breaking pre-sales, while the underlying civil construction was quietly handed off to unvetted subcontractors who slashed curing times to meet aggressive cash flow targets. Visual, animated map explaining Tipune wind corridors and salt-air corrosion mechanisms. Why does this specific structural pattern collapse so quickly in cities like Shanghai, Shenzhen, or Guangzhou? It comes down to a fundamental miscalculation of coastal geography. When you build a super-tall luxury skyscraper in inland markets like Chengdu or Xi'an, your structure is subjected to a relatively predictable low-moisture environment. But the moment you position a 66-story megastructure directly at the mouth of a massive industrial river delta on the East China Sea, the engineering tolerances become razor thin. The structural engineers at the China Strategic Forensic Engineering Institute have repeatedly pointed out that high-rise structures sitting on coastal mudflats and alluvial riverbanks are subjected to a brutal combination of high hydrostatic pressure, relentless maritime humidity, and aggressive chemical exposure from airborne industrial sulfur and salt compounds. When a developer compresses the construction calendar, forcing concrete pours during heavy monsoon seasons, or rushing through the application of multi-layer exterior waterproofing membranes, they are signing a death warrant for the building's outer env. Visual. Detailed zoom-in of constructural stress points under high tunt winds. When a building's exterior envelope fails, it exposes the post-tension cable system to immediate chemical attack. During a major coastal typhoon, a tower like the Zenith Residences must absorb hundreds of metric tons of dynamic, lateral wind load per square meter. The tower survives these forces by flexing, but if the high-tensile steel cables inside the concrete floor slabs have already begun to rust and pit, because an unsealed anchoring pocket allowed salt air to penetrate deep into the structural matrix, the metal loses its elasticity. Instead of flexing safely under typhoon loads, the internal tendons begin to snap under the immense pressure, the parallel that every forensic engineer in China is privately discussing. Even if the luxury developers are spending millions in public relations to suppress the conversation, is the structural deterioration pattern seen in rapid urban build cycles. When speed is prioritized over material science, microcracks form in the concrete during the initial curing phase. In the open, humid air of the Shanghai waterfront, those microcracks act as capillary channels, sucking moisture deep into the floor slabs, leading to rapid rebar expansion, which ultimately forces the outer concrete layer to literally explode off the building's frame. This isn't a simple failure of a single subcontractor. This is an entire structural system designed to maximize short-term branding premiums while shifting the long-term physical and financial risks entirely onto the buyers who believed the luxury marketing. The automotive logo on the tower's crown didn't alter the laws of chemistry and civil engineering. It merely served as an expensive screen to hide the structural compromises unfolding behind the glass curtain wall. Music shifts, melancholy, Indosan-style low strings mixed with urgent metronome beat visual. The screen transitioned to gritty, first-person video footage filmed on mobile phones. The camera pans along a ultra-luxury residential interior with multi-million-dollar finishes, then zooms in on hairline fractures, spreading across a polished marble wall coating. Text flashes. Inside the waterfront penthouses. Narrator. Behind the secure, fingerprint-activated security gates of Shanghai's most expensive residential address, the multi-millionaire owners who bought into the dream of vertical luxury are realizing that their investments are structurally falling apart. The glittery marketing campaigns and the prestige of the international Hypercar brand are utterly useless when the concrete terrace beneath your feet is physically cracking. To truly understand the human and financial devastation of this engineering disaster, we have to look past the corporate press releases and examine the lived experiences of the high-net-worth buyers who are now trapped inside a vertical structural nightmare. Let's look at the specific, devastating reality of the individuals who trusted the developer's pitch. Meet Li Jun, a prominent venture capitalist who made his immense fortune financing tech startups across Hangzhou and Shenzhen. In late 2021, drawn by the global prestige of the automotive branding, Li liquidated several high-performing asset portfolios to purchase a premium, four-bedroom corner suite on the 48th floor of the Zenith Automotive Residences. He paid an astonishing $8 million in cash, believing he was securing a multi-generational sanctuary for his family, complete with sweeping, unobstructed views of the Huangpi River skyline. Visual. Reenactment scene of a resident looking through laminated instructional reports in a luxe office. The witness timelines, resident discoveries and evacuations October 12, 2024, the first sign, just 6 months after moving into his luxury suite. Li Jun notices a persistent, high-pitched whistling sound during a minor seasonal storm. Forensic inspection later confirms the noise was atmospheric pressure leaking directly through unsealed structural holes in the building's outer structural envelope. March 18, 2025. The structural shift. Control of the condominium board officially transfers from the billionaire developer Zhang Xilong to the resident owners. Li Jun is elected to the board alongside Chen Xiaoxuan, a prominent forensic accountant from Shanghai's Pudong Financial District. August 4, 2025. The Balcony quarantine. Following a targeted drone survey by the China Strategic Forensic Engineering Institute, engineers document active concrete spalling and loose structural aggregate along the outer rim of Li's terrace. The resident board issues an immediate emergency advisory ordering all occupants between floors 30 and 60 to completely cease stepping out onto their outdoor balconies. November 24, 2025. The cable failure. At exactly 2:14 p.m., the heavy metal protective cable cap snaps off the 38th floor, launching itself through the air and obliterating a section of the luxury pool deck. The residential tower descends into absolute panic, sound effect. Distant crashing debris, camera shaking. When the metal structural cap shattered the pool deck tiles, Li Jun was sitting in his 48th floor study. He described the physical sensation as a deep, low-frequency thud that reverberated through the entire concrete frame of the skyscraper, rattling the premium glass cabinets and causing his family to flee toward the building's central elevator core. For weeks after the incident, the developer's public relations team tried to claim the event was an isolated, cosmetic anomaly caused by an external wind vortex. But Li Jun and his fellow board members refused to accept the corporate gaslighting. They utilized the independent forensic reports to launch an exhaustive, top-to-bottom structural audit of every square meter of the property. What they uncovered was a horrifying catalog of infrastructural neglect. On the upper floors, close to the $59 million triple-story penthouse, the situation was shockingly grim. The penthouse itself, spanning nearly 2,000 square meters and featuring the track-only supercar welded permanently into the main living pavilion, was suffering from severe environmental exposure. The specialized external glass curtain wall, designed to protect the multi-million-dollar carbon fiber automotive trophy from UV degradation and moisture intrusion, had been improperly anchored to the structural header. Water was actively pooling under the supercar's reinforced mounting platform, leading to micro-fissures in the structural floor slab itself. Visual. Graphic comparing luxury, amenity promise versus physical reality. But the anger inside the tower wasn't just driven by fracturing concrete and snapping steel cables. It was fueled by a profound sense of corporate betrayal regarding the building's elite lifestyle infrastructure. Consider the case of Wang Ning, a high-ranking corporate executive who purchased a multi-million-dollar mid-tier suite specifically because of the extensive, exclusive amenity packages promised in the glossy sales brochures. Wang was an avid yachtsman who planned to anchor his custom-built sports cruiser at the tower's private riverfront superyacht marina. He had also paid a hefty premium for the guaranteed permanent VIP beach club partnership at the exclusive 5-star luxury island resort, situated on an island off the Shanghai coast, which included a private commuter ferry operating directly from the tower's base. Shortly after the resident board took control in March 2025, Wang Ning attempted to finalize the logistics for his private marina slip and activate his exclusive beach club credentials with the resort's management team. He expected a routine confirmation of dates, docking permits, and ferry timetables. Instead, when Wang presented his official Zenith Automotive Residences purchase deed to the luxury hotel's corporate representatives, their response stopped him completely cold. The 5-star resort management had absolutely no record of any permanent, legally binding partnership with Zhang Xilong's development firm. There was no reserved stretch of private sand for the tower's residents. There was no exclusive commuter ferry schedule in operation, nor had any structural permits ever been secured to run a private commercial transport line from the mouth of the river to the offshore island. The entire high-end lifestyle package that had been used to justify the astronomical pre-sale prices was a complete and total illusion. It was a marketing fairy tale, designed to extract maximum capital from wealthy buyers before the developer exited the project. Scrolling legal document concerning financial forensics and asset. Tracing the financial damages are staggering, while the residents are dealing with the psychological trauma of living in a skyscraper where they cannot safely step out onto their own balconies. The financial forensics are revealing an even deeper level of corporate malfeasance. The separate financial lawsuit filed in February 2026 by forensic accountant Chen Xiaoxuan exposes an immense corporate shell game executed by the developer in the final weeks before handing over control of the building. The forensic accounting audit documents that just days before the resident board took possession of the property, Zhang Shilong signed a series of long-term, non-competitive service contracts worth millions of dollars. These contracts locked the building into multi-year operational agreements with unvetted, newly formed subsidiary companies owned entirely by Zhang's close business associates and family members. A security vendor with zero historical track record in luxury high-rise management was awarded an absolute, non-revocable contract worth over $800,000 annually. A concierge management entity was actively invoicing $34,000 every single month for administrative services, supported by documentation so incredibly thin that the resident association couldn't verify if a single hour of actual Ray had ever been performed. Furthermore, the developer charged the association $70,000 in monthly rent for a small operations office located inside the building, housed within a commercial unit owned directly by a shell corporation controlled by Zhang Shilong himself. Despite the fact that ample, free common area office space had been explicitly factored into the tower's original architectural blueprints, visual, dramatic reenactment of its expert inspecting wiped certed racks, but the final, most brazen act of corporate sabotage occurred in the tower's central IT control room. Under local housing guidelines, developers are legally required to hand over full, unmodified financial ledgers, historic vendor invoices, quality control testing certifications, and structural concrete pour logs to the incoming resident board. When Chen Xiaoxuan and an independent cybersecurity team finally gained access to the association's primary server infrastructure in late 2025, they discovered that every single hard drive, accounting database, and construction archive had been completely and intentionally wiped clean. Years of critical financial history, subcontractor communications, and engineering inspection logs had been permanently erased. The developer had left the building's new owners completely in the dark, forcing them to pay inflated operational fees out of their own pockets, while scrambling to piece together the legal evidence needed to save their structural and financial investments from total collapse. Music shifts, driving high-stakes urban industrial beat. Visual, the camera pans out upward from the roof of the Shanghai twisted glass tower over the entire waterfront channel, then cutting rapidly to graphics showing cranes over construction sites across other major Chinese economic hubs. Narrator. The structural decay and corporate sabotage inside Shanghai's Zenith automotive residences are not just a disaster for the elite billionaires who bought into this single waterfront address. They represent a terrifying, multi-billion-dollar warning sign for the entire luxury real estate sector across mainland China. Because right now, the exact same financial and branding model that built this failing Shanghai tower is being copied, approved, and sold to thousands of unsuspecting wealthy buyers in almost every major Tier 1 and Tier 2 megacity in the country. Look at the skyline data. From the high-tech corporate corridors of Shenzhen and the booming financial districts of Guangzhou, to the dense urban waterfronts of Wuhan, Tianjin, and Hangzhou, branded luxury towers are rising at an unprecedented rate. These projects carry the ultra-prestigious names of international fashion houses, legendary European sports car manufacturers, and elite five-star hotel chains that have absolutely nothing to do with actual civil engineering or structural construction. Visual. Map of China with flashing red icons on major cities braced for real estate. Risk the prospective buyers looking at these gleaming glass monuments assume they are purchasing an elite standard of structural perfection backed by a legendary global name. They have no idea that under the standard operating procedures of branded real estate, they are stepping into a legal and physical minefield. Let's break down the cold, systemic mechanics of how this global luxury branding loop actually operates, and why it leaves the ultimate consumer completely exposed. The branded real estate expulsion loop phase 1, the brand licensing. An international automotive or fashion brand licenses its iconic logo and color palette to a local developer for an enormous upfront multi-million-dollar fee. The brand signs away zero liability, ensuring they have no legal oversight over concrete pouring, structural steel grades, or architectural execution. Phase 2, the hypercapitalization. The developer uses the massive prestige of the global brand logo to command astronomical premium prices during the pre-sale phase, drawing in billions of yuan from ultra-high net-worth buyers who believe they are buying precision engineering. Phase 3, the cost-cutting cycle. The developer funnels the massive pre-sale revenues into other real estate ventures or corporate shell companies, while squeezing subcontractors on material costs, waterproofing layers, and concrete curing cycles to maximize short-term profit margins. Phase 4, the clean handover. The developer sets up non-competitive, long-term service contracts with their own shell entities, wipes the financial and structural data logs clean, and hands governance over to a resident condo board, just as the initial structural warranties expire. Phase 5, the brand exit. The structural defects emerge. The exterior concrete spalls, the post-tensioned cables corrode in the maritime air, and the residents are left with multi-million yuan repair bills, while the global brand retains its pristine reputation behind a fortress of licensing paperwork. Visual. Closing scene. Fast kinetic cuts of the vernal skyline, contrasting the rusting steel blueprints. Shown earlier, what is happening at the Zenith Automotive residence in Shanghai is already repeating itself across the country. In the Edgewater district of Guangzhou, wealthy owners at a prominent tower branded by an Italian fashion house are actively battling their developer over 76 distinct construction defects, including cracked foundation slabs and total failure of the upper exterior cladding systems. The prominent real estate attorney leading that case described the pattern as a vicious, endless cycle that now impacts virtually every single new high-rise residential condominium handed over in coastal China over the last 5 years. The ultimate tragedy of the $1 billion Shanghai Supercar Tower is that the $59 million LAR penthouse buyer occupying the 3-story apex is in the exact same legal and structural predicament as the owner of the smallest mid-tier apartment on the lower levels. Both are completely on the hook for massive structural engineering repairs that the developer should have executed flawlessly before a single key was ever turned. As we look toward the future, the critical question hanging over the entire luxury vertical landscape of East Asia is no longer about which global brand can create the most extravagant architectural lifestyle fantasy. The question is much more urgent, much more grounded, and much more dangerous. How many more multi-billion-dollar luxury towers are currently hiding severe, systemic engineering failures behind a premium corporate logo, and which branded monument is going to start shedding its own structural skeleton next? Music crescos to a sharp, dramatic stop visual. Graphic on screen with subscribe button and recent episodes flashing on screen. If this kind of raw, data-driven engineering exposure is what you want to see more of, hit that subscribe button right now. We dig deep into the mega structures before the corporate lawyers manage to seal the records. See you in the next investigation.